You made a choice yesterday that changed your life. Maybe you texted someone you shouldn't have. Maybe you took a different route home. Maybe you said yes when you meant to say no. And now you're sitting here wondering, what if I hadn't done that? What if I could go back and undo it? This is the seed of one of the most troubling thought experiments in all of physics, the grandfather paradox. And it's not really about time travel at all. It's about a fundamental crack in how we understand causality, choice, and the arrow of time itself. Imagine you built a time machine. You step inside, turn a dial, and you're standing in the year 1955, the year your grandfather met your grandmother at a dance. But you're angry. You're furious at your grandfather for something he did decades later that hurt your family. So in a moment of rage, you prevent that meeting from ever happening. Maybe you sabotage the dance. Maybe you convince your grandmother to go somewhere else that night. Maybe you do something far worse, and then something impossible occurs to you. If your grandfather never met your grandmother, your parent was never born. If your parent was never born, you were never born. But if you were never born, how are you standing here in 1955 with the power to prevent anything at all? This is the paradox. You cannot exist without your grandfather meeting your grandmother. Yet your very existence is now impossible because you prevented that meeting. You both have and do not have a reason to have traveled back in time. The cause and the effect are eating each other. For over a century, physicists and philosophers have wrestled with this contradiction. And what they discovered says something profound about the nature of time, causality, and maybe even about human consciousness itself. The paradox first appeared in science fiction around the 1920s, in pulp magazine letters and stories by writers like Charles Kluge and Nathaniel Schachner. But it didn't become truly central to physics until Einstein's theory of relativity suggested that time travel might not be theoretically impossible at all. If space-time could be warped enough, near a black hole, through a wormhole, in a rotating universe, a closed loop in time might open up. Once that door cracked open, the grandfather paradox walked through. In 1949, mathematician and logician Kurt Gödel solved one of Einstein's field equations and discovered something startling. His solution described a rotating universe with closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. These aren't just theoretical squiggles. They're geometries of space-time where, according to general relativity, time travel is actually allowed by the laws of physics. For the first time, a paradox moved from the realm of fantasy into the realm of genuine physics. But if time travel is possible, the grandfather paradox seems to prove it cannot be. And physicists have spent decades trying to resolve this contradiction. The first major solution came from Igor Novikov, a Russian physicist who proposed what's called the self-consistency principle. Novikov's idea is radical in its simplicity. The laws of physics will never allow a paradox to form in the first place. If you travel back in time and try to harm your grandfather, your gun will jam. Your hand will slip. He'll duck at exactly the moment you strike. The universe will prevent you from doing it, not out of magic, but out of the fundamental laws of physics themselves. In other words, what happened, happened. Your trip back in time to prevent your grandfather's meeting was never the true cause of their meeting or not meeting. Your trip back in time was always part of the causal chain that led to your own birth. You were always going to fail to stop them. The universe is self-consistent. Causality holds. Novikov illustrated this with a famous thought experiment involving a billiard ball and a wormhole. If a billiard ball enters a wormhole and exits into the past, aimed at its earlier self to knock it away, the mathematics work out perfectly. The angles and forces align so that the ball can never actually prevent its own journey. It knocks itself at just the right angle and velocity to guarantee the past that already happened. It's deterministic, inevitable. Causality is preserved, but so is your existence, and so is your grandfather's meeting. But there's a darker solution that physicists have also seriously considered. It's called the many worlds interpretation, and it comes from quantum mechanics. In this view, the moment you travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, You don't erase yourself from history. Instead, you create a new timeline, a parallel universe, where you were never born. The version of you that traveled back in time continues to exist, but you're now stranded in a universe where you should never have been born in the first place. You're a ghost in a dead timeline, a living paradox in a world that contradicts your existence. A third possibility is even stranger. In 1992, physicist Stephen Hawking proposed what he called the Chronology Protection Conjecture. The universe, Hawking suggested, might have a hidden law that prevents all paradoxes from ever forming. Time travel might be possible, but you could never travel back far enough to change anything crucial. The laws of physics might actively forbid backward causation. You could visit your grandfather's era, but only in ways that don't affect the causal chain that made you. You're trapped in the role of a spectator, watching history unfold without the power to change it. Each of these solutions reveals something different about how the universe might work. You cannot have free will, a single unified timeline, and time travel all at the same time. The universe will not allow it, but here's where the paradox becomes something deeper than physics. Human beings live with a version of the grandfather paradox every single day. You exist because of choices your ancestors made. You exist because your great-great-grandmother said yes to a man at a dance, because your grandfather didn't die in a war, because your parents met in a coffee shop at exactly the right moment. The causal chain that led to you is unimaginably long and fragile, and yet you feel like you have free will. You feel like you can make choices that matter. You feel like you could undo yesterday. You could go back and say the thing you didn't say. You could make the choice you didn't make. You're not trapped in a predetermined universe. You're not locked in Novikov's self-consistency, where every action you think you're freely choosing was always going to happen. But this is a paradox too. Your consciousness experiences choice and freedom, yet you know, logically, that you cannot escape the causal chain that made you. Physicist Igor Novikov might argue that this isn't really freedom at all. Your feeling of choice is an illusion. You always make the choices you make, because the laws of physics guarantee it. Your sense that you could have chosen differently is a trick of consciousness, a retrospective narrative your brain creates to make sense of causality. What's haunting about the grandfather paradox is that it doesn't resolve. Every proposed solution trades one impossibility for another. Determinism or multiverse, causality or consciousness, free will or predestination. The paradox reveals that you cannot have it all. The universe will not allow it. Something has to give, and maybe the universe is making a choice for you every moment. Maybe you're living in Novikov's self-consistent timeline right now, and your sense of free will is the elegant machinery of a universe preventing you from ever creating a paradox. Or maybe you're branching into new timelines with every choice, spawning an infinite cascade of parallel worlds where you made different decisions. Or maybe, and this might be the most unsettling answer of all, the paradox itself is trying to tell you something. The grandfather paradox exists because causality is real. Your grandfather had to meet your grandmother. Your parents had to meet. You had to be born, exactly as you are, or you wouldn't be here asking this question right now. The paradox is a proof of your own existence. It's proof that you matter, that every moment of your history matters, that you could not be unmade without erasing billions of moments that came before you. The person you are now is a time traveler from the past. You were sent here by every ancestor you've never met, by every chance encounter and terrible decision and fortunate accident that led to this moment. You cannot go back and change them, you cannot undo them, and you cannot exist without them. So when you wonder what if you hadn't made that choice yesterday, when you feel the weight of your own free will and the crushing reality that you cannot undo anything, remember, you're living inside a grandfather paradox that resolves itself the only way a paradox can. You're living proof that the causal chain holds. You're living proof that the past cannot be changed, because if it could be, you wouldn't be here to change it. You are the answer to your own paradox, and you always have been.